Okay, everybody, my watch shows 10:02. May I suggest that we get underway? My name is Tom McAllister.
Please do.
My name is Tom McAllister, and on behalf of the Kawartha Lake Stewards Association, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our spring 2022 meeting. We've been saying amongst ourselves, the board and the planning committee, that this will be our last virtual meeting. This will be our last virtual meeting, I think, for the last 2 or 3 meetings, but we were pretty optimistic, and of course things never unfold quite as planned, but we are hoping that this will indeed be our last solely virtual meeting, and that we'll be able to get together with you in the same room this fall if things continue to improve. So once again, welcome to our spring 2022 meeting. It's such a pleasure for us to be able to spend some time with you and to update you on what's happening with your Kawartha Lake Stewards Association. I want to thank in advance Bob Bailey. He is assisting with the technology here today. So thank you very much, Bob. And could we have the next slide, please? In terms of what we're going to cover, we're scheduled from 10 to 11:30 this morning. We'll begin with a little bit of housekeeping and an acknowledgement. Then I'm going to turn it over to Ed, and he is going to give the results of our first ever photo contest, which was a lot of fun and very successful. Then we're going to talk a little bit about this year's water quality report. It's just literally become available on Thursday this week, so it's just hot off the press. We'll talk about that. We're going to go through a number of our key projects, and we'll have the project leads give you a quick update. As we go through those updates, if you have any questions, if you just feel free to put them into the chat. There will be, as you see, a Q&A session, and it's easier if you put them in the chat, and then we can just sort of group them together if there's similar questions and so forth. But if not, there'll probably be an opportunity for you to unmute and ask your questions live as well. Then I'm going to turn over to Bob, and he is going to have a panel discussion with Tanner and Aaron, and then we will close. So that's what we're going to cover over the space of the next just under 90 minutes. Next slide, please. As I say, questions, comments in chat, we'll be keeping an eye on them. There'll be lots of opportunities, so please, tell us what's on your mind, and we'll look forward to having that conversation. It would be helpful because some people are on sort of limited bandwidth. It would probably be easier, and there would be fewer distractions if you would kindly mute your mic and your video when you're not speaking. As you would have learned when you logged in, this meeting is being recorded so that we can put it on our website afterwards. Next slide, please. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the fact that the greater Peterborough area is in the Mississauga-Nishnawbe territory in the context of the Rice Lake, Treaty 20, and Williams Treaty. In keeping with our mission, KLSA acknowledges the efforts and the knowledge of the Indigenous people towards protecting their environment, and the fact is that we can learn a great deal from them. So we certainly appreciate their leadership and support. Next slide, please. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Ed.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for attending today. This is the only time in this meeting that the MC and my board would allow me to speak. So I'm going to speak for a little bit. What I'd like to start off with is to say thank you so much to all our volunteers and supporters who help us financially and on all our projects. We wouldn't exist and could not do anything without you. With the changes happening in our environment, an increase in the use of our lakes and streams, it continues to be of utmost importance to monitor and know what's in our waters and provide the data and information we collect to those who can take appropriate action if needed. For this year's annual Lake Water Quality Report, our editorial committee decided to have a photo contest, as Tom mentioned, the first one, and I think we'll continue this. And the winner's photo was to be featured on our Lake Water Quality Report cover. We received many wonderful photos, all of which are in this year's report, scattered between the articles. You can go and flip through them. once you get a report or on the online, the digital copy, and find them there. Thank you to everyone who submitted photos. We'll be doing this again next year, like I said, so get out there, take some pictures of our wonderful Kawartha lakes. Our editorial committee had a really tough time picking a winner, so they engaged the whole KLSA board, who voted for first, second, and third place. The winning photo of a juvenile Midland painted turtle soaking up the sun on Stony Lake was submitted by Anne Grunow, who happens to also volunteer at the Ontario Conservation Centre in Peterborough. For submitting the winning photo, Anne receives a framed photo of the cover of our Lake Water Quality Report, showcasing her photo. Now, I know Anne is on the meeting here, and I would invite Anne to unmute, put your video on if you want to say a few things about the picture, where you took it, you know, your turtle conservation volunteering work. Just for a minute, Anne.
You're on mute, Anne.
There, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thanks very much. I don't usually win anything, so it's very exciting to win. Yeah, this was taken along the Stony Lake trails, which if you are into hiking at all or taking long walks, is a great place to go. This guy, little guy here, was about, probably smaller than the palm of your hand. So he's probably a couple years old. He was just basking in the sun last spring. So he's pretty cute with his little legs spread out in the back. And yeah, I am a volunteer with the Ontario Turtle Conservation Centre in Peterborough. We are the only registered hospital for turtles in Canada, actually. And we take in turtles from all across Ontario that have been injured or are sick. And we rehabilitate them, and then when possible, release them back into the wetlands from which they came. So we are governed by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. So we have to actually take the turtles back where we found them. Within a kilometer where they were actually found, and or the nearest viable body of water. So we're all over Ontario, right from the Manitoba border all the way to the Quebec border. So you can imagine at this time of year, we're trying to get out about, I don't know, 1,500 or so turtles from last year. So there's quite a bit of work at this time of year getting them back home once they've you know, rehabilitated themselves. So it's a pretty busy time. So come and check us out. We do virtual tours there, and if you're interested in turtles at all, they are an integral part of our wetlands and our lakes and streams.
Thank you, Anne. And once again, that's the Turtle Conservation Center in Peterborough. And if you want to put up an email address or how to contact you on our chat, please feel free.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please, Bob. And there we have one of our board directors, Jeff Chalmers, presenting Anne with the framed print of her winning photo cover. Now, Anne, I've been hearing some whispers. Are you the actual photograph taker, or does that credit actually belong to someone else?
No, I actually took the photograph. My husband actually noticed the turtle when we were walking.
Okay. That's what it was.
I was actually taking a picture of a heron at the time.
Well, that's wonderful. Team effort. Thanks once again, Anne, and everyone. Get out there, take your photos. We're going to be doing this again for next year's report. Next slide, please, Bob. Speaking of a heron, we had two close runners-up photos, one of a heron and the other of a loon, both taken on Lake Scugog and submitted by Rachel Mack. Now, I don't believe Rachel's with us this morning. She had another event that she was running, I believe. But she is going to receive a nice little gift basket of goodies with things from Kawartha Country Wines and other places. So thank you again, Rachel. and all the others who submitted photos. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Ed, and congratulations, Anne, and everyone else who submitted. As Ed mentioned, it's the first time that we'd run the photo contest. I think it was Kim's suggestion, actually, so congrats, Kim. And it was so well, there's so much positive participation. We look forward to offering it again. This is the copy, or the cover, excuse me, of this year's water quality report. We're very pleased. As Ed has mentioned, everything that we do is because it's facilitated by volunteers. I mean, the entire board is are volunteers, and all of the water testers and all the program leads and assistants and so forth. It is all volunteer done, and we simply couldn't, we wouldn't exist but for your active participation and financial support. So thank you very much. Jeff has already posted it on KLSA WordPress. So if you go onto our website, you can see it. We literally just got to, it's hot off the press, only came out on Thursday of this week. I have sent it, if you're a donor, I have sent out hard copies in the mail. They went out yesterday. It's in the process of being distributed now. If you go on the website and you see the advertisers there, almost all of the advertisers will have had, or will in the coming days have copies dropped off. So feel free to, drop into a local marina if they advertise in the report, and perhaps even if they don't, the municipal offices will certainly be receiving them and so forth. So it will become more broadly available in the coming days as we have a chance to get it out. If you haven't received a copy and can't get somewhere to pick one up, we'll be happy to send you a copy. So just send an email to the address you see at the bottom there, klsa@klsa.info, and we'll send you a single copy. If you are an association and you're looking for 20 or 25 copies, it's a little bit harder for us to mail that. As you can appreciate, it's expensive. So if you contact us, we'll tell you where you can pick them up. There's sort of a depot at the Herald in Lakefield, or failing that, Ed does an awful lot of driving through the area, and I'm sure that he'd be more than happy to drop a bundle off. So if you would like a copy, we'd encourage you to pick one up and find out all about the health of our water systems and the activities of all of our volunteers. So next slide, please. So now, as I mentioned at the outset, we're going to go through some sort of short updates on some of the work that's being done by the volunteers of the Kawartha Lake Stewards Association. What we're going to do is have the project lead and the respective projects give you a bit of an update. So next slide, please, Bob. So I'm going to turn this over to Brett Trigano, and he's going to update us on this particular project. It's an exciting update.
Thank you, Tom, and good morning, everybody. So we're hoping to have the Fleming students themselves come here and present, but unfortunately, they had other commitments come up. So we once again partnered with the Fleming College Credit for Product program. And what it is a team of students, in this case, Carissa, Daniel, Mitchell, and Noah, from the environmental program at Fleming College in Lindsay. They get to choose actually from a bunch of different organizations and a bunch of different potential projects on what they like to work on for the semester. And so we had every year we come up with a good idea from people like our volunteers. And so this year we decided to focus on updating our aquatic plant guide. And this is a really great resource that KLSA produced with help from Eric Sager and Andrea Hicks and a few other colleagues in 2009, which is available on our website. And it's a really great resource, really popular amongst everybody here in the Kawartha Lakes. And so their job was to provide an update. It was been more than a decade since this publication, and things can change crazy from year to year on our lakes. And so in 10 years, there's a lot to get caught up on and a lot to add to the aquatic plants guide. And so, for example, the students looked at some literature reviews on, what is the key role of aquatic plants in our lakes. And there's some new emerging plants out there, like Starry stonewort, hybrid Eurasian milfoil, wild rice, that type of thing. So they've added some information pertaining to those plants. Also, thanks to those who submitted some photos as well for our kind of real life photos of aquatic plants. That was missing from our current publication, as well as how to report invasive species sightings, not only of plants, but of animals and fish and wildlife throughout the lake. So say thanks again for the students and the partnership. And right now it's in a draft form, but stay tuned, and we'll be working on finalizing this and publishing it probably, well, we'll see, but maybe next year, hopefully.
Excellent. Brett, thank you very much. As you say, it's been a while since 2009, and it'll be great to have that updated. It's a wonderful resource, and I'm sure a lot of people look forward to getting an updated copy. So thank you to you and the students. Next slide, please. I'd like to turn it over now to Cindy Lee, who's going to take us through an update of the E. coli sampling program and the phosphorus sampling program. So Cindy, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Cindy, and I work with Mike Dolby on this program. It's been running for over 20 years, and we had some good results last year. We had over 430 samples taken through the season over 13 lakes. And I'd like to thank all of those volunteers that were out on the lakes and running their samples in and out and to the lab. And that protocol will continue for 2022. The lab is under COVID restrictions, and they wish us to make our appointments to pick up our bottles again for this year. I will go back. I'd also like to thank Diane Trezulli for helping us. We've updated the manual, and that will be coming out at the end of May. So that will be a little bit of a change. And another change will be we're moving from 6 samples to 5 samples this year. So that decreases a visit back into Lakefield and out on your boat for E. coli. We feel that the data set is pretty stable. 90% of our samples were low, reaching maybe a maximum of 20 counts per 100 mils. And we just thought it might be time to examine maybe even considering lightening the load for our volunteers. And I think now with gas prices, that may be an extra bonus, but it doesn't impact our long-term objectives of monitoring E. coli throughout the Kawarthas. I'd like to just take the opportunity to remind everyone, please sample after our July 4th start date. Those dates will be circulated with the package that comes out at the end of the month, because additional charges are incurred and they're substantial. So if we all stay within our sampling period of after the July long weekend and through to Labor Day, that would be very good. And our costs are remaining the same. Again, just to repeat that our samplers will be picking up their own bottles from the Lakefield lab, and they're requesting, actually they're required, appointments to be made and give them about 48 hours notice. I'd like to tell you that the annual report, or the Lake Water Quality Report, has everyone's results there, and including your own, but you will have seen that already. We do circulate those results as they come in. And I'd like to make a special thank you to Mike Dolby, because he does an extraordinary amount of work on the program, and he's done some excellent summary reports that will be in the Lake Water Quality Report, which is electronic, but again, a paper copy you can obtain. So I'll keep my presentation short, and thank you all, and hope to have everybody back for sampling in 2022. Thank you.
Good stuff. Well, Cindy, I think you're on the next slide as well, are you not? If you could please advance, Bob. Oh, is that going to Mike?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. My apologies.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. All right. The Lake Partner Program for total phosphorus and Seshi depth measurement, it's not actually a KLSA program. It's operated by the Ministry of the Environment in collaboration with FOCA. But KLSA tries to assist testers in our area, and we analyze the results for the Kawartha Lakes. And as with E. coli, the total phosphorus team this year is Cindy Lee, who takes the lead with my assistants, Mike Dolby. So the last year's 2021 program proceeded normally after, of course, the previous year's pandemic difficulties. So we're pleased about that. But due to changes in the Lake Partner Program protocols, the results of last year's testings still aren't available. They won't be available until about the end of May. KLSA will analyze the results for our lakes when they're available, and we'll post them on our website. Starting this year, in the KLSA annual report that's just been published, it'll be reporting the total phosphorus and Seshi results from 1 year earlier. That is, the report will contain the 2020 results, not 2021. So if you want to see last year's results, you'll have to wait until they're posted on our website. We'll be sending out a message about that to everybody by email. So this year's 2022 program, it has now begun, and normally, I'd like to say, and now that with this year water levels being normal, we urge testers to get out there and submit their May sample as early as possible. Now, I've heard that some people may not have received kits this year, people who have traditionally tested in the past. If you haven't got kits, you should get in touch either with ourselves or directly with the Lake Partner Program. If you go on the internet and Google Lake Partner Program, it'll tell you how to contact them and find out why you haven't got the kits. I think the problems in 2020 with the pandemic caused some difficulties. If people didn't get to test at all, they may not have sent out sampling kits. So if you haven't got your kits, get in touch with them as soon as possible and have them send them to you, or get in touch with myself or Cindy. KLSA, as I said, we don't actually run the program, but we appreciate knowing who is testing phosphorus in our area. So we'd like to have any existing testers get in touch with us. And of course, anyone who would like to become a tester for phosphorus, if you get in touch with us, we can tell you how you can join the Lake Partner Program. So if you have any questions, as I say, you can contact KLSA, either Cindy, who is the lead, or myself. Cindy's email is on the bottom of the slide. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Next slide, please. I'd like to turn over now to Brett, who's going to update us on the water temperature and dissolved oxygen monitoring program.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, last year was our inaugural year for monitoring water temperature and dissolved oxygen through our lakes. So we're really excited to kind of get this program up and running. We did have a pilot year, kind of 2020, I guess it would be. And so, yeah, the intent of this study is it's kind of a 3-year thing where we, with the help of volunteers, of course, we focus on a few different areas of our lakes. One of the areas is the nearshore environment, that kind of, 3 feet or shallower, kind of right off the end of your dock type of thing. So volunteers are attaching these little data loggers about the size of a golf ball, and they monitor temperatures every hour throughout the summer, June, July, and August. And then in addition to that, volunteers hop in their boat and go to the deepest part of their lake with a probe and just drop it down every meter from the surface all the way down to the bottom and record dissolved oxygen as well as temperature data. And so these two variables, water temperature and DO, which is often called for dissolved oxygen, really important parameters for the condition of our lakes. And with climate change, monitoring water temperature is just a good thing to do. And right now we don't know our water temperatures on our lakes. And so we're starting to put this picture together. On the bottom right-hand side, for example, is kind of all the data we have so far, and from January 1st to December 1st. And we're starting to capture, averages where we should be for certain times a year, and, how high it's been recorded and how low. So it's only 2 years of information, but it's, it's just, really important work. So thank you. We've had 6 volunteers on 6 lakes for deploying the portable temperature loggers in the nearshore environment. And we had 8 volunteers on 10 lakes doing the probe sampling out in the boat. So yeah, and just for reference, looking at the graph on the bottom right, this time, so May, where are we here? Middle of May. So if you look at the graph there, May is a transition month. Just looks like, water can go from 10 degrees all the way up to 20, for example. And so last year or so, averaging around this time period was around 14 degrees or so. I know at the beginning of the meeting here, just talking to Mike on Kachuanuka, and he was measuring his water temperature at 19 degrees. And I know on Lake Scugog yesterday, it was about 21 degrees. So it looks like we're warm for this time of year. But anyways, so lots of cool things. And there is an article in our this year's annual water quality report for kind of a more in-depth analysis on our key findings. And I'm just also excited to announce that Parks Canada, they've loaned us 10 of these portable loggers to attach to buoys in the middle of the lake. So we're looking at doing those to capture data on a year-round basis. So back to you, Tom, and thanks again for everybody for participating.
That's great. Thank you very much, Brett. Next slide, please. I'd like to turn it over to Kim to give us an update on our Natural Edge program.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Yes, so hi, I'm Kim, and really happy to talk about the Natural Edge program. So this is a nationwide program that has been developed by Watershed Canada, and KLSA is a delivery partner for our area. So we have been implementing the program for the Kawarthas Lake since about 2020, and most recently with some support from the Environment Council as well. And the goal of the Natural Edge program is to help landowners restore their shorelines to a more native state. So we tend to work a lot on like grassy shorelines or shorelines that have been eroded. And these can of course use some help from native plants, which improve the health of the shoreline and the water. It reduces erosion. It can help geese stay off properties, gives some animals some natural habitat, all kinds of really great things. So this program is developed to, provide a lot of support to helping restore shoreline. So briefly, a shoreline expert will actually come out and assess the site, and in consultation with the landowner, will actually develop a full planting plan to figure out what kind of native shrubs and trees can be planted in that area. And then we order and purchase all those shrubs, trees, wildflowers, mulch, all that kinds of stuff. And we bring all those planting materials with us to the site. And then we even help organize volunteers to come help plant everything if that is wanted. So there is a $250 fee associated with this for the landowners, and then the program pretty much subsidizes the rest of everything. So if you're interested, the whole process takes about half a year. We do an assessment in fall or spring, and then the following fall or spring, we will do the planting. And it takes about 3 years for the plants to fully establish along those shorelines. So in 2021, we did 11 shorelines on Lovesick, Big Cedar, Sturgeon, Big Balls, Upper Stony, and White Lakes. and we had 17 amazing volunteers come out and help us with those sites. We are actually preparing to do 4 more plantings in a couple of weeks, and we could use some help with some volunteers. So we have one site on Buckhorn on June 3rd, and then sites on Upper Stony and Stony on the 4th and 5th. So if you are interested in helping and coming to see what we do, you don't need any experience with planting. We'll provide all the tools and plants. Please do get in touch with me. My email's at the bottom of this slide here. So into the future, we do hope to continue the program, but we need to secure more funding. So if you are interested in getting your shoreline assessed, please do reach out to me. I can get you on the waiting list and we can talk a little more about the program and I can keep you updated. So that's what we have now. The biggest thing right now is getting those 4 plantings done in June. So that's all I have for today. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Kim. Next slide, please, Bob. I'm going to turn over to Carol now, and she's going to update you on the Starry Stonewort program.
Hi, so I'm Carol, and I'm looking after the Starry Stonewort monitoring program. Starry Stonewort monitoring for KLSA is relatively new. We started in 2020 with just a very small pilot project, which was basically me putting the fingers on some of our board of directors who were kind enough to go out and try it out for me. Then last year in 2021, we partnered with Kawarthas Conservation, and KLSA had 22 volunteers on 11 different lakes, which was really wonderful. And the volunteers did a really great job and trying out something brand new. So that was great. So the purpose of the program is basically to help spread awareness of a relatively unknown or little known aquatic invasive that's just emerging in the Kawarthas area. Right now, it is spread pretty widely throughout the Trans-Savarin waterway, and we're just trying to track where exactly it is and the spread and distribution across the area. So what do we ask our community scientists to do? Well, this is the fun part. So all you do is you take your 2-sided rake, which Patty McDonald was holding on the slide there, and it's tied to a rope. You toss it into the water like Doug Dewar is doing from his boat on Big Bald Lake. It doesn't have to be from a boat. You can do it off your dock. You can do it at boat launches, which is where I would prefer, since that's where Starry Stonewort normally shows up. You pick 1 to 3 locations, and then every 2 weeks you go out and toss your rake into the lake. You slowly pull it back in, collecting plant material. And when you get it on shore or in your boat, you spread it out like the ladies are doing on the back of the canoe there. And you just see what you can identify in those samples. For me, one of the best things about the program, although finding Starry Stonewort is really important, was actually learning to recognize our common plants that are in our Kawarthas lakes. Up until this point in my life, I looked in the water, I saw green things that were weeds. Well, by getting involved in a program like this, you start to see things as different. You start to see them as actual plants, and you start to understand the importance they play in our lake ecosystems. So that's a big takeaway from the program. That's in addition to actually mapping Starry Stonewort. The other thing I've learned in the program over time is the real importance of preventing invasives being transported to your lake in the first place. And that brings up things like clean, drain, and dry. And hopefully this starts to get into our consciousness that this is something that we need to do consistently all the time, so we don't have to worry about new invasive species. So once you've sorted your plant material and decided what was what, and if there's any Starry Stonewort in there, we have you report that finding of Starry Stonewort on one of the invasive species apps, and that ends up going then to their Ontario Invading Species Awareness Program, so that it's everyone's aware of it. Let's see, what else do I have to tell you? Yeah, that's really about it. So basically, it's about creating a better understanding of what's in our lake and looking specifically for Starry Stonewort. And that's really it. KLSA provides the training and all the equipment. So all you need is an open mind and some curiosity and an ability to get a little bit dirty, because it can be a little messy when you pull the plants out and start sorting them. So that's about it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. Next. Okay, so this comes to this section of the agenda for sort of Q&A, because you probably had some, sort of thoughts come to mind as you've heard the various updates. So what we're going to do is, I see that a number of questions have come up in chat. So maybe Bob, which one do you think we should start out with?
I think Mika Foster, who had a couple of questions, and if you were before that and I didn't catch you, please jump in. Mika, I'll ask your question for you, but if you want to come in to chat with the person who answers, feel free. So first of all, and I think this one's for Brett in talking about the water temperature DO project, is there a relationship between water temperature and when water levels increase and decrease throughout the year? Brett, do you want to address that one?
Sure. Thanks for your question. Great question. Short answer is yes. And there's a great article that Mike has in our upcoming report, Mike Dolby, on his observations on Lake Kawarthas. And so we haven't looked at it throughout Kawartha Lakes wide. But Mike, did you want to add anything just briefly on some of your observations last year?
Well, yeah, I would say that it has, what I found was that the temperature didn't really vary so much with flow or water level, but dissolved oxygen, well, and temperature at depth would vary with flow more than anything else, but water level not necessarily. Of course, in the Kawartha Lakes, once we hit May 24 and the canals in operation, they try and maintain the level of the lakes as constantly as possible. And during that time, the water level, the water temperature is warming up just due to sunshine, and then in the fall it's tapering off. So the water level isn't really affecting it so much as just how much sun it's getting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting, Mike, because it's actually maybe more complicated than Mika hoped, because the Trent Severn, of course, is a regulated system, as Mike was saying. And part of that regulation, the modeling they do, the management they do, is based on what's happening with the air temperature, which in turn affects the water temperature. So one of the reasons why Mike went swimming yesterday is that we've had this first, I think it's the first real warm patch in air temperature. So most of our lakes are pretty shallow. So yeah, water temperature really responds quickly to air temperature in this area. But in terms of water level, it's almost the reverse of what you would think. They regulate the levels based on, among other things, what's happening with air temperature. Second question, I think, goes to Kim, Tom, and that's again from Mika. Thank you, Mika, for your engagement. Can shorelines regenerate naturally if there is a no-mow zone at the water's edge?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So yes, they can, is the short answer. So a no-mow zone is, of course, an area along the grass, along the shoreline, and it's suggested to not mow somewhere between around 3 meters of the grass from the shore's edge. And so that allows the grass to kind of grow some deeper roots, which is kind of the goal of stabilizing the shoreline. And of course, yeah, plants may also move in and refill that space. So it is possible. It might be a slow process. And of course, some invasive species, some undesirable plants may also kind of move in and take over that edge. So the advantage of purposely planting kind of native plants is that it gives the native plants a chance to compete, outcompete those invasive species. You will have a deeper root system. You of course will get more of a say on how it looks aesthetically. And of course, if geese are an issue, kind of having higher grass may not necessarily deter them. You can actually purposely plant them like shrubs, kind of higher barrier to prevent them. So no-mow zones are one of the easier and doable approaches, and definitely would recommend that if that is kind of the starting point.
Thanks, Kim. Next question is for Carol. This is from Janet Klein. Sorry if this was answered, but was there any talk about the results of the Starry Stonewort program from last year? She enjoyed taking part. Janet enjoyed taking part last year. Carol?
Sure. I was really glad to have Janet last year. She was new to doing this sort of thing, and she did a great job. So Janet, last year, I have an article in our water quality report that does talk about some of the things we found last year, but I'll just give you the highlights here. Last year, the most significant find we had was Big Bald Lake. Our volunteer there, Doug Dewar, that was in the slide, the man in the boat, he discovered a bay, basically the bay where his cottage is, unfortunately, was fully infested with starry stonewort at that point. But the cottagers had been watching it spread for a couple of years and didn't realize what it was until Doug was out there with his testing rake and found that. So that was probably the most significant thing, because up until then, Big Bald Lake hadn't been identified at all. We also found new starry stonewort patches on Shamong, and about 4 new areas of Stony Lake that also had starry stonewort. So I was glad to see that most people didn't find starry stonewort, and that's important to know as well, because as we test year after year and look year after year, we're going to be able to see, when starry stonewort arrives in a lake that haven't previously had it, or if it has spread in a lake that we already were aware of. So that's a great question.
Just a follow-up, Carol, from Alexandra. What are the key ways, other than the drain, clean, and dry, to prevent the invasive species spread?
Well, I guess it kind of goes back to what Kim was just saying about having a natural shoreline, providing competition for invasive species, things like that. So that doesn't just apply to the ground. It also applies to the water. If you go out and clear, your shoreline because you don't like weeds, you're opening yourself up to invasion of invasive species. Starry stonewort in particular likes to go where there's not much competition. So my advice to everyone on Stony Lake, where I'm located, is learn to love your weeds no matter what they are. I would rather have Eurasian water milfoil than starry stonewort, so I will now learn to love Eurasian water milfoil. But mostly keep your shoreline as natural as you can. If you need to clear a little tiny swimming area for yourself, fine. But don't get out and try to turn your area into a pool. The other thing that I think is really important is learning to recognize what belongs and what doesn't normally belong in your lake. If you know what plants are commonly found in your area, that's really important, because then when something shows up that you don't recognize, you'll know. And if there's a way of eradicating it or getting control of it early on with early detection, that's a wonderful thing. Starry stonewort is not yet, there's not really a way to control starry stonewort at this point. There are people doing hand removal and things like that, but there is no really effective way of doing that. So early detection, and there's some other things you can do to help slow the spread of it, which is great. But that would be my advice. I mean, there's things coming that aren't around here yet, like water chestnut and hydrilla, water soldier. If you know that those are there, some things can be done to stop that spread. And so learn about what's in your water. That's probably one of the best things to do.
Okay, thanks, Carol.
Just the clean, drain, and dry. I know people say we already know that, but we all know it. We don't do it. And invasive species, that is the main pathway for invasive species from lake to lake. So knowing it and doing it consistently is really the key. Just clean your boats, watercraft of all sorts.
Okay, thank you.
That's my pitch.
Now, I'm mindful of time, and my master's looking at me, giving me that look. So I'm going to take the last couple of questions maybe and ask folks to inquire to. I think the best contact is Cindy Lee at klsa.info, as you see there. Somebody's asking about what's known or what's happening at Sandy Lake, and another question about what's happening or what's the state of Cameron Lake. And yeah, I think we've got some reports we can share with you on that. So I think the best way to deal with that is maybe send Cindy an email and we'll get you that information. Janet asked about when the new plant guide is going to be available, that Brett was talking about, the partnership with Fleming College students. That I think he said next year. There's quite a process involved. It's in just draft form now. And love your plants. Does KLSA have a position on the province's awarding permits for the reward herbicide? Short answer, no. I'll ask any of my fellow board members to kick in on that. And yeah, Cindy's already answered. Sandy Lake does E. coli, and we're looking for testers for Cameron. So please contact Cindy again if you're interested in becoming one of our testers. When do we start the Starry Stonewort program? Sorry, last question, then we're going to have to move on. Carol, quickly, the Starry Stonewort program for this year?
Yeah, we'll be doing that starting again mid-July.
Mid-July, okay.
Yeah, training will be in June.
Okay, thanks very much. And back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Bob. And thank you to all the people who submitted their questions. As Bob said, we appreciate hearing from you, and we will get back to you. And also want to thank the point persons on the various projects for their great answers. So that's excellent. And Bob, now I'm going to turn it over to you and your panel.
Thanks very much, Tom. And I'll ask Brett Tricuno to come back and help me introduce our panel. So you've heard so much about the important community science that KLSA participates in. And so we thought it'd be of interest for you to hear from a couple of experts about what community science is from a research point of view, and then what happens to it from a conservation authority point of view. So we've asked two experts to come and join us. They're going to present the background that I know we'll find interesting, and then there'll be time for us to ask them questions. So Brett and I talked about this. We really wanted to have a great panel on this. Happy to introduce Aaron Smith, who's a PhD candidate on Ontario Tech University, close to my heart. I'm a prof at Ontario Tech University. And also really happy to have Tanner Liang, who's a water quality specialist. I hope I got that right, Tanner, at the Kawarthas Conservation Authority. And Brett, of course, argued vigorously for 10. No, not at all. We really thought a great combination of two people to talk about community science. And so the way we're going to do this, and I think this is right, give me the thumbs up, Tanner, if this is right. Aaron's going to talk about kind of what community science is and how it works, and then Tanner's going to talk a little bit about what happens to it, and then we'll have a chance to chat with them. So over to you to start, Aaron, and I'll just tee up your slides here.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
One sec. There.
All right. Wonderful. Yeah. So thanks for having me here today. And yeah, I'll just be talking a little bit about what community science is, giving you some background before Tanner talks about how they actually use it. Right. So what is community science? So the first thing you might notice is the term I'm using is maybe a little different than what you're used to, which would be citizen science. So citizen science, community science are pretty similar. But there's a slight difference. Community science is based on research that's kind of based on the goals of the community. It's really important to have a lot of sharing of the information involved. So that's why I use the term community science for the work I do. But I'll also be kind of talking about citizen science as well, which is very much in the same realm and overlaps in a lot of ways. So citizen science has been going on for a very long time. It's not something that's new, but maybe something that's been growing a lot recently. And so it started basically any time that the public's been involved with helping with scientific research. So going back even to the early 1900s, there's bird counts was one of the popular ones, and that's still going on today. If you've heard of maybe the Christmas bird count is a very popular one. So, you know, people go out and look at the birds and count whatever birds they see on Christmas Day. And so projects like this are very large scale citizen science projects. So they provide a lot of information from across the world. And so basically since then, projects have grown, especially, you know, now that we all have little computers in our pockets, right? It's a lot easier that whenever we're out on a walk or just, you know, on your property and you see something, you could make observations. So other popular versions are things like iNaturalist, EdMaps. That was, I think, used for the Starry Stonewort project on the Kawartha Lakes as well. So some other examples there. Yeah, and then so with our project is a little bit more smaller scale compared to these international projects, but it's still in a research lens, a very large scale project where we're doing a whole region of kind of sampling. And with that, we can collect a lot of data by using our community science method. So next, I'll just talk a little bit about how specifically we do that. All right. So for our work, it's not as large as a project like iNaturalist, but because it's smaller scale, it does have some advantages, right? So we're specifically working with local groups like Kawartha Conservation. We have worked with the KLSA 2 years ago for my project there, and we're recruiting local volunteers and doing specific training for them as well. So this helps with our project, making sure we're getting good data from people that, you know, have been given background on how to properly collect samples and kind of knowing what they're looking for as well. So with that, after training, volunteers collect their samples, right? We have a specific schedule that they follow. We pick up those samples, bring them back to the lab, analyze them, looking at things like nutrients, E. coli, suspended solids, those sorts of things. So just trying to see overall what's going on in the lake. And then of course, a very important part of that is sharing our findings. So we do that through multiple methods, right? I'll have an article out in the annual KLSA report, and then we do lots of presentations and that sort of thing. And then also sharing specific reports with our volunteers as well. All right. So what are the benefits? Why do we do this kind of research? So traditionally, right, for scientific institutions like universities that I'm at, we would, you know, just go out, take our boat, go out to the middle of the lake and take our samples. And that's fine. And it's good for getting overall readings of lake health. But there's a lot of benefits for us as researchers for doing this kind of work. For one thing, we get access to the nearshore zone, right? On a lot of the Kawartha Lakes, the property, the waterfronts are all owned by, you know, different property owners along the shoreline, so it can be difficult to access by boat. So having that access through working with community scientists is really essential for my research. The project scale, again, I couldn't collect, you know, 30, 40 samples in a day and have them all processed, and especially from such a large range of sites across a large area. So that's a huge benefit with this project. Another thing we've been able to do is transition during the pandemic, right? That was a year where even other citizen science programs like the Lake Partner program wasn't able to run, but we were able to use the citizen science, community science method in a year when, you know, there was no regular sampling going on. We had, you know, our volunteers were wonderful. They saved some freezer space for us and froze samples throughout the year. And that allowed us to continue monitoring to see what's going on during the pandemic. So that provides some useful information. And then finally, another benefit is in that last photo, you can see something called a Hester Dendy artificial substrate. So I like to call them bug hotels. We were able to do some biomonitoring on our lakes at some of the sites. And so that provides even more information about what's going on in the nearshore zone of the lakes. And in combination with our water quality data, gives us an even better idea of lake health across this region. So lots and lots of benefits from this methodology. And then how can you benefit? So yes, we know that of course it benefits us as volunteers, but it also benefits it helps us as researchers, but it also helps our volunteers. So we provide information to our partner groups like Kawartha Conservation. And of course, Tanner will talk all about how they use that information. And then also other groups, like we obviously work with the KLSA. I've provided information for the reports last year and then again this year. And then sharing at events like the AGM here today, other community events, we like to share information about what we're doing so that everyone is starting to gain more knowledge and use that to help preserve the health of the lakes. Yeah, and then hopefully you get a little bit can gain some scientific understanding about your lake as well, which is an added benefit. So with that, I'll pass it over to Tanner.
Thanks very much, Erin. And I'm here to say, I'm sure among many other people at the meeting, I was one of Erin's volunteer scientists. I tried to do a good job. Hopefully my data got used. Anyway, we'll switch over to Tanner's slides. Just one sec. So as I mentioned, Tanner's a water quality specialist at Kawarthas Conservation, and he's also a special graduate faculty member at Trent University. So Tanner, over to you.
Thank you. And thanks again for having me. Super honored to be here. And for today, I'll talk a bit about Erin's project, which we work closely, and it's called the Nearshore Water Quality Monitoring Program. Also want to acknowledge that other people had large inputs and lots of support, which was from Dr. Andrea Kirkworth and Debbie Beliga as well. So props to them. Thank you, everybody. So the Nearshore Water Quality Monitoring Program is a community-based program that looks at the nearshore region of the lake. And how we looked about it was first, we did a lot of management plans for many of the well-known Kawarthas lakes. And in them, we did identify these missing knowledge gaps, which was really the nearshore area. And the nearshore area is really important. It houses most of the aquatic habitat where fish use for spawning, for nursery, for small fish. It holds a lot of the aquatic plants. As well, it's also the area which we as humans use a lot. That's where we put our docks. That's where we like to sit and relax, maybe go for a swim, go for a paddle. Maybe most likely it was the place where you learned to swim. So it's a really important area, and we don't really know much about it. So if we don't know much about it, how do we provide recommendations to better it, better the health of it? Next slide, please. So again, what is the data used for? Many of you do the fun bit of going out in the field, enjoying the sun, maybe not the bugs, but definitely the warm temperature, scooping some water, enjoying that. But what happens after when that bottle of water turns into numbers? So that's what I'm here to talk about. Next slide, please. One of the main things that is used for is to address data gaps, as I mentioned before. There's only one water quality specialist at Kawarthas Conservation, and I only have so much time. I would love to spend weeks and weeks sampling. So maybe if you talk to my boss about it, maybe they can put in some more money for me to go out. But looking at the map on the left, those are sites on Balsam Lake. Those are the community, nearshore sites. And then in the middle, that's when we did our lake management plan. Those are the green in-lake sites, and the red are the tributary or the stream sites. And then on the right is our current sites for Balsam. So as you can see, having community-based projects does provide a more comprehensive or analysis of the lake as a whole, especially when lakes have different land uses, and we've to some degree altered the surrounding landscape. And when we alter those landscapes, we alter what's going into the lake. So having multiple sites give better kind of data for us to look as a whole and to provide some recommendations. Next slide, please. These the data can also be used for reports, so sharing that information is really important. It's one thing to produce data, but if nobody knows of it and nobody's using it, then we question, is it worth doing the project? And some of the reports go into our own, so the Kawarthas Conservation Watershed report card, our internal reports, as well as updates on recommendations for implementation. Another possible avenue is providing the data to additional scientists, such as the government. As you can see on the left side, I believe that is Aaron's paper. So using that data to put it out to other scientists who may use that data for modeling, for example, or developing other tools that we can use for better management. Next slide, please. The data can be compared historically, and if the program is ongoing, it could be really good to track changes. It could be used to track kind of rapid extreme events, such as an overflow event, for example, or slow changes in the boiling frog analogy. There is slow changes. You know, if you put a frog in a pot of water and you slowly heat it up, the frog won't know until it's too late. So using that data really helps us track really slow changes, such as climate change. One can argue it's happening now and it's rapid, but providing baseline is also an important piece to it. Next slide, please. Another avenue which we use for management is to identify these hotspots or areas of concern. Providing lots of sites produces a lot of data, and then we can really localize in certain areas if we're concerned about the results. So if there's a bay that has really high exceedances or really concerning results, you know, we can then provide recommendations for stewardship, and which I believe you guys have an awesome program with the Riparian Restoration. You know, these hotspots can also guide us on where to, what activities to be implemented. So if it's a septic bed, you know, if it's overflowing, you know, we could provide recommendations or provide advice to that landowner. Or if the water quality comes back and it's showing certain indicators of runoff, we can have activities related to sediment erosion control or fencing if it's cattle. And also we could look at implementing tools and best management practices for chloride and oil and grease. So that's really good. So, you know, it's always revolving, monitoring, implementation of action, monitoring to see if that action is really helping the system. Next slide, please. And I've been talking about guiding management decisions, and really it helps, even if it's at a local level, you know, helping us get to know what the landscape is all about. And we use that when we're providing recommendations to the municipality, for example, providing input on shoreline setbacks, ways to better protect that ribbon of life, and thus protecting the water quality in which we all play and use. I believe that is the next. And so thank you for listening. I believe we're having a panel now. So any questions? I believe some were put in the chat.
Okay, thanks very much, Tanner. And yeah, we've got some time for questions, and I have a couple, and I'll maybe ask Brett to come. Yeah, Brett, you're back there, because I know I've got one, a burning question. But let me go to what we have on our chat room first. Somebody asked about. Oh, it was Ed. Ed was asking about the reports that Tanner referred to in his presentation, and I put the link to Kawartha Conservation. I believe, Brett, all of those reports are available digitally there. Yeah, okay. So let me maybe get the ball rolling with I don't know, an awkward question. I had a student who worked on community science in relation to some conservation areas in southwestern Ontario, well, across southern Ontario. And one of the questions that always comes up with volunteer collection of data is quality assurance. if I can put it that way. So is the data as good, as solid as we get from professional scientists? And I'm using air quotes because I'm a so-called professional scientist, and I know this discussion comes up a lot. So I'd love to hear Aaron and Tanner's frank views on that. How do you approach that issue of QA/QC with samples or data collected by volunteers?
Yeah, so for our project, it depends on the project type, right? What stage you're kind of doing that at. But specific to our project, it's based on a few different points. So basically, the training is kind of the biggest part, where we make sure that we go through a fairly extensive training so that volunteers know exactly what they're doing. We provide them with, laminated sampling procedure sheets, stuff like that. So we're making sure that they have that information. And then there's other studies as well that have been done, even in Toronto with storm water sampling, where they've compared samples from the same site, professionally collected and, collected by amateur scientists, and found there's no difference with this type of sampling, as long as people have been trained and have those proper procedures in place, that it is actually really effective.
Yeah, I remember we did a little study comparing volunteer observers. I think we were doing stream habitat with pros, and you're exactly right. And I think part of it is there's more invested often in the volunteer. I'm not saying enthusiastic volunteer, jaded professional, but I think with the great training, and I know you provided, Aaron, in your study, that's the key. And then I guess you've got some QA/QC stuff afterwards. If you find out that I mistakenly included a frog in my water sample or something, you can tell from the numbers if something, just like we do with samples collected by pros, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other thing, is also with my biomonitoring on top, right? A lot of those sites overlap. I can also see, if there's a very clear, outlier that something is clearly not right. Even sometimes we've had samples that come in and they've got a whole clump of algae in it, and that's kind of a pretty good indicator.
Sorry.
But yeah, so you can definitely also go back through also once you're looking at the data to see what's going on there too.
Tanner, anything from you on that one?
Yeah. Communities, I always joke around, it's like, how hard is it to scoop water? Anybody can take my job. No. So like you and Aaron have mentioned, I just want to echo, there are other things that we can do as well. I think the main thing is providing the necessary training and resources so that we mitigate any errors and biases. There's also ways that we can, we as the professionals can put in to help kind of build that credibility. Is one thing is like having blanks and having 2 samples taken at one site or duplicate. So those are additional steps that we can use as well. And when I was in my previous role, I was working and training community volunteers, and I think really that the training really helps, and having them engage so that they have a personal connection to the project. That way they're willing to go the extra mile to ensure that the sample's done correctly. I think that building that personal connection to the project is also as important as well.
We're getting another, Aaron, this is the most awkward question ever asked of a graduate student. So Cindy Lee says, when will your thesis data be available or published? And I know, it's always a terrible, when's your thesis going to be done? Anyway, over to you on that one, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's funny. So I'm planning to do my defense this summer. So that'll be likely early August. Yeah, so it's coming up. But so I believe when it will actually be published online, I think that takes a little bit of time. It kind of goes through the university. So I would say maybe like look for it in the fall. And we can make sure that we get that information to you when it comes out. If people are interested, we can make sure to send that along.
Great stuff. Maybe we'll have you back for our AGM to talk a little bit about what happened.
Absolutely.
At your defense.
Live stream.
Brett, over to you for anything you wanted to ask folks.
Yeah, great job, guys. Great work you're doing. I find it fascinating, you know, Tanner, you mentioned there's so many data gaps kind of in the nearshore, right, next to shoreline. And, you know, a lot of our sampling, I guess, has been done, you know, in the middle of the lake, for example, through the Lake Partner Program. And so really happy to see people focusing, you know, where we spend most of our time, you know, hanging off the dock, around the shoreline, around the fire pit. And so presumably, I guess we would pick up impacts a little bit quicker because it's at the shoreline. And then I guess one of my questions would be, or just comments is, you know, for the last couple of years, I don't know if it's COVID driven, there seems to be just a lot more activity on our shorelines. A lot more people converting, you know, their cottages, you know, a lot of development going on. And would you expect to see kind of a change in, you know, the parameters you're looking at, you know, with all this developments going on?
Great question, Brett. Yeah, you know, all water is lake water is what I like to say. So any water that falls down, it's going to end up in the lake one way or another. But during that time when it's going into the lake, it's going to accumulate, it's going to pick up all kinds of stuff. So when we're talking about, you know, what happens if a development goes in, you know, if there's exposed soil, then we would expect more sediment to go in. And that sediment does carry some, you know, sand, silt, and clay. That also houses, you know, possible contaminants. So if it was historically a junkyard, you know, there may be some heavy metals associated with those particles that's going in, you know. And when we, you know, that's like the rapid, you know, and more long term is the alteration of the shoreline. So when we have less riparian habitat, not so great shorelines, yes, there's that erosion, but also that reduced filtration when rainwater enters it, after development I'm talking about. So, you know, if there's septic bed, there's maybe increased inputs of nutrients, but also E. coli as well. So more development will affect the water quality, and that's what I'm going to expect. One thing of interest is the usage of salt that we've been using during the wintertime. So when we put in new subdivisions or new houses, obviously there's going to be roads. So those roads need to be, you know, ice, well, less ice for safety. So the application of salt, but people use them around their house too. And these systems, especially in the Kawarthas and the freshwater, have, you know, evolved for millennia to not deal with salt. So this most recent activity of us being here and our obsession with salt, I do expect that we're going to see some higher concentrations of chlorides.
Yeah,
great question.
Andrea Kirkwood, Aaron's supervisor, has done some great work on that, among a few other folks. I'm mindful of time, but on the other hand, we have a question from our MC, so I guess I have to ask it. Tom's wondering why the level of dissolved oxygen is important.
Is that for me?
I think it could be Tanner, it could be Brett, could be Aaron. Maybe we'll let Brett ironically go after it, since he's our dissolved oxygen person. Brett?
Yes, Brett.
Sure. Yeah, and Aaron and Tanner.
Yeah, we'll put him on the spot.
Yeah, no, feel free to jump in. You know, you guys are the experts in this for sure. But one interesting thing about oxygen, of course, you know, we need it. We breathe air, but in the water, you know, all of our aquatic life need it as well. And so it is super important, just as important for them and our functioning kind of lakes and, you know, healthy lakes as it is for us. And the interesting thing about dissolved oxygen is, you know, it's really often dependent on temperature. And so cold water can actually hold more oxygen, you know, just physics, I guess, and chemistry than warm water. And so, you know, as water's warm, and which we think they're going to do because air temperature is warming, and through climate change, for example, then even, you know, all else being equal, even if we didn't do anything, just for the very fact that waters are warming, dissolved oxygen is going to go down because it's just not able to hold as much as cold water. And so it's very important to kind of track, you know, okay, how low is it going to get? Is it going to impact anything or not? And it can change based on the surface of the water and how deep you go as well. A lot of our probe sampling in the deep basins, you know, we're finding that dissolved oxygen below the thermocline, so the transition from hot to cold temperatures in the lake is quite low. And so we're tracking that to see, is that just kind of natural in deeper portions of lakes? For example, if you've got a lake like Cameron Lake, you know, that's 50 meters or so deep, is it natural for dissolved oxygen to be near zero, you know, below 9 meters, from 9 meters down to the bottom, which is what we're finding now. And so there might be a window there where fish, you know, might be able to survive, or where they might be stressed, depending on temperature, dissolved oxygen. Anyways, more than happy to talk, you know, about it more. But Aaron, Tanner, if you wanted to add anything, you know, feel free.
Sure, I can add two things. Echoing Brett on the biotic stuff, oxygen is also important for the incubation of eggs as well in the nearshore. So really having that constant supply of well oxygenated water is really important for the development of next year's or next generation's fish.
Cool.
Another important thing is the regulation of phosphorus from internal loading. So if there's, during the summertime when there's no or less oxygen in the deeper parts of the water, that releases phosphorus from sediment through a chemical reaction. So it's important. It's a natural phenomenon. Just internal cycling is just when humans kind of modify it through our activities, that's when it becomes a issue of sort, and when it affects our enjoyment, I guess, of the lake. I know we're getting close to time, so I'll stop.
And from old MOE lake surveys in 1970 to 72 compared to the most recent data we have, including oxygen profiles and nutrients, and some really cool stuff related to, as we were talking about earlier, more permanent development that's happened around some of those lakes in that interim period. So keep your eyes on our website for that. That's coming in a little while. But meanwhile, let me just thank Tanner and Aaron. So interesting. And I think it's great. You know, obviously we have a lot of folks here who participate in community science, work hard for it. And I think it's great for them to get a peek into the sausage factory a little bit to find out what's happening there, and the great work that you folks are doing in incorporating community science into your research and to your responsibilities. So thank you very much. Before I turn it back to Tom, I just wanted to invite folks that are here to listen in. There's a few academics, researchers in our region that work on Kawartha lakes, or lakes in the Kawartha region, and we're having a little get together next week, discussion about what we've done, what we're doing this summer, and what we're planning to do in the future. Very informal, but if you're interested in watching that, listening in, and there'll be an opportunity for folks to ask questions. It's going to include Andrea Kirkwood, Tyler Harrell Lyle, Paul Frost. I think Graham Raby's coming, and students in their lab. I think Erin's going to be there. I don't know if she knows that or not yet or not. But yeah, if you're interested, please send me an email. That's my official university email address, and I'll send you the Zoom coordinates and a tighter schedule. Please send me that email rather than telling me now that you want to come, because I can only organize so many things. Okay, back to you, Tom.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bob and Aaron and Tanner. Very informative. So that brings us to a wrap for today. I'd like to conclude once again by thanking our volunteers. You can never say thank you too often or too sincerely. We just wouldn't exist without everyone who makes it happen. So thank you for all your hard work that culminated in this year's water quality report. I'd like to thank the folks this morning who have spent the last 80 minutes on a sunny day sitting in. I very much appreciate your time. I'd like to very much thank both the people who submitted questions and the presenters who answered them. So on behalf of the Kawartha Lakes Stewards Association, sincere thanks for your support. I hope that everyone has a really safe and enjoyable and more normal summer now that things are sort of coming around a little bit in terms of the pandemic. Hope everyone has a safe summer, and we hope to look forward to seeing you in person in a meeting room at our fall meetings. So without any further ado, thank you so much and have a great day.
And could everybody put their cameras on so we can all wave goodbye to each other? There's so many great folks here. It'd be great to have this.
Bob, are we going to leave the Zoom on for some informal chat for a few minutes, if anybody wants to?
Yeah, I'll be able to stay on here till 11:30. So just a few minutes, I'll stick around for whoever cares to chat, for sure.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Peter, I see you're finally joined. You had some difficulty, Peter Franson. So this has been recorded and it will be up on our website in possibly a week or so. So stay tuned if you want to kind of review what you missed. If nobody's going to chat, maybe, are there any other questions maybe we could tackle as the minutes sort of slip away?
You could sing a song, Ed.
While you dance and act.
I see, Bob, that there's a request from Mike Perry whether the host could turn on his camera function. I don't know if it's been disabled. Oh, there we go. There's a question from Mike Perry, sort of to the group, but quick question. Overall impact of climate change on our local lakes to date?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I'm not able to turn my camera on here for some reason. Oh, maybe there. Let's see, someone have flipped a switch. There we go. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Just really quickly, just to have the expertise and the experience in the room. You know, as someone who grew up in Fenland and taught swimming lessons in Cameron Lake, I'm really interested in kind of, I know it's a huge topic, but is there a way to just speak really quickly generally about the extent of climate change and its impacts we may be seeing on our local lakes? Like 0 being no real impact at all, 10 being our lakes in 10 years, you know, is there a way to kind of really simplify it?
Yeah, Mike, Bob here. I think the best way to answer that, now, of course, my colleagues will jump in as well. It's complicated because so many things have happened associated with climate change. You know, we were talking before, and by the way, I think you were asking about Cameron earlier. I'll certainly flag Michelle's thesis when it comes up, because Cameron was one of the lakes she looked at, how it's changed in 50 years kind of thing. But also, as you might have noticed with Tanner's presentation, there was a Cameron Lake, I think Balsam and Cameron management report that if you don't have it, it'd be great to look at. But yeah, so climate change, and that's part of the basis for Brett's project. So climate change has happened and resulted in some changes in lakes globally. A lot of pretty good evidence about that. But because so many things, including the invasives that we work on, development that we see and look at some impacts. So it's really difficult to say, yeah, this change in this lake caused by climate change. That's my take anyway. I don't know if others want to kick in on that.
I
Tanner?
remember when I was in high school, zebra mussels were the big, were the big issue. Yeah, thanks.
You're young. I remember working on zebra mussels when I was an assistant prof.
Right.
Not here, but in the Great Lakes. Anyway, sorry, Tanner. Brett, do you want to talk about that climate
Mike,
change?
there's a great resource actually. Have you ever heard of Drew Monkman?
No.
No. He's very active. He's a naturalist in the Kawarthas area. Kind of like a journalist and great photographer. And he's actually writes books on season to season happenings in the Kawarthas. And he's got Nature's Year in the Kawarthas, for example. And he has a website, and it's very good, kind of layman's terms changes, his observations. He keeps a good eye on kind of what's going on, and month by month, and how that's changed from his previous observations. We've actually had him speak at a few years ago at one of our meetings, but he'd be a great resource. So yeah, it's Drew Monkman.
Yeah, I was going to ask you on the spelling on that, Brad. I'll look it up. That's great. Thanks.
Sure, Monkman is just Monkman.
Yeah, I just put the link to the website there in the chat room if you want to have a look.
Helpful. Great. Thanks very much.
Can I just put in a little plea? In terms of monitoring change, having long-term databases is ideal. But Cameron Lake is one of the few lakes in our area where, for example, a Lake Partners program, we have somebody who'll test for 1 or 2 years and then they drop out. And we haven't had a committed long-term tester in Cameron Lake. So we really don't have good data, long-term data on phosphorus, for example. And I think Cindy also mentioned we don't have any E. coli measurements going on in there. So if you know of any young soul who is growing up on the lake and is likely to be there for a long time and would like to get out there in the boat a few times a year to take samples, we'd love to have a really
Mike's pretty young,
solid long-term tester there. Okay.
Funny, Mike, I sent Lee a meeting to volunteer during the panel discussion.
Great.
Yeah.
Good to hear, Mike.
Well, sure.
Great.
Thanks.
I was just going to add a little personal comment, Mike, as somebody who's grown up on Clear Lake. So just remembering back in the 50s and 60s, I remember distinctly that a warm summer, the water temperature was like 74 degrees Fahrenheit, which is around 23. Now we're consistently getting water temperatures midsummer up in the 26 and 26 plus range in Celsius. So the water is warmer. I remember back in the 60s, when you got into August, it would be like pea soup on the lake because of the phosphorus loading and the algae. That cleaned up when zebra mussels arrived, and also we stopped using phosphorus in many products. So the phosphorus levels today are probably lower, but the zebra mussels also clean the water up, which means we get more light penetration into the lake, so we get more weed growth, and which can ultimately result in more algae growth as well if the phosphorus level gets up over the 20 parts per billion range. So those are just my observations from years of being on Clear Lake.
Well, that's really helpful. Thanks. Just what I was looking for. I know it's such a huge topic. Sometimes we shy away. Well, we can't really say much, but because it's such a, there's so much to, so many aspects to it, but these little things are really helpful. Thank you.
Can I just add that you remember a few years ago, we did I say we worked with Queen's University on doing core studies, and one was done in the Cameron Lake. And one of the things that surprised me was that their findings suggested that at one point phosphorus levels, for example, were a lot higher in Cameron, and that they've come down. But anyway, change has been taking place over long periods of time due to cultural changes, logging in the early days, and forest fires, and all the changes that have taken place over long periods of time. So I think change, as I say, change is the only constant, and climate change is certainly continuing that trend.
All very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. I think I'm being told by my producer that it's time for me to get to other things on my list today.
Thanks, everyone. Great meeting. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank